The city of Alexandria breathed more slowly after Rome arrived. Sounds softened, colors dulled, and even the sea seemed to move with caution. Cleopatra noticed it first at night, when silence pressed against the palace walls like an unseen force. She had known many kinds of quiet before, but this one carried judgment. It was the quiet of waiting, of power deciding what to do next. Once, the palace had belonged to her. Every hallway reflected her will, every servant moved at her command. Now, the same halls felt narrower. The marble floors were unchanged, yet her footsteps sounded smaller, less certain. Rome had not destroyed her home. It had simply stepped inside and claimed the air. Cleopatra understood conquest. She had studied it, negotiated with it, survived it. But Rome's cruelty did not arrive with flames or chains. It arrived with smiles, with patience, with rules spoken softly and enforced without question. This made it harder to resist. Violence could be met with pride. This could only be endured. Each morning began the same way. Light crept through thin curtains, touching the walls without warmth. Cleopatra rose slowly, allowing herself a moment to breathe before standing. Her body obeyed her less than it once had. Hunger lingered, not sharp enough to complain, but constant enough to weaken her. Rome controlled even her meals, not through denial, but through careful reduction. Servants still attended her, though their hands shook. They avoided her eyes, not out of disrespect, but fear. To be seen caring too deeply for her was dangerous. Cleopatra did not blame them. Empires thrived on fear passed quietly from one heart to another. During the day, she was left alone. This solitude was intentional. It forced her thoughts inward, made memories sharper. She remembered standing before crowds, speaking with confidence shaped by years of learning. She remembered alliances formed with words and glances. Those memories now felt like stories belonging to someone else. As the sun lowered, tension returned. Cleopatra felt it in her chest before the guards arrived. She prepared herself not with armor, but with stillness. Every night required strength of a different kind. Strength that left no marks and earned no praise. The guards never rushed her. They waited, allowing her dignity the illusion of choice. When she walked beside them, their presence felt like walls closing in. They did not touch her unless necessary. That restraint was deliberate. Rome wanted her to comply willingly, to participate in her own submission. They led her to a small chamber far from her former throne room. It held a single chair and a table worn smooth by time. No decoration softened the space. It was not meant for comfort. It was meant for clarity. Here, Cleopatra was not a queen. She was a subject. Men entered after her. Their voices were calm, measured, almost kind. They spoke of Rome, of order, of history. They asked her to recall events, decisions, alliances. Each question stripped context away, turning survival into suspicion. They did not accuse her openly. They allowed implication to do the work. Cleopatra answered carefully. She chose words that revealed nothing beyond necessity. Silence was dangerous. Honesty was twisted. Every response felt like stepping across unseen ground, unsure where it might break. Hours passed without acknowledgement. No water was offered unless requested. No seat unless granted. The strain was subtle but effective. Her legs ached. Her throat burned. Rome understood endurance as a weapon. When the questioning ended, it did so without warning. She was dismissed as if she had been an object inspected and set aside. No verdict was given. Uncertainty followed her back through the corridors, heavier than any chain. Alone again, Cleopatra allowed herself to sit. She did not cry. Tears felt like something Rome could take from her. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and counted her breaths until they slowed. Each night, she survived by narrowing her focus to the present moment. History would later speak of her pride, her beauty, her dramatic end. It would not speak of these nights. It would not mention how Rome reshaped her sense of self through repetition and control. That truth lived only within her, unrecorded and unshared. Yet something unexpected grew in that silence. Stripped of performance and expectation, Cleopatra began to feel clarity. Rome demanded her presence, but not her belief. Within her mind, she remained free to observe, to understand. She saw Rome not as a force of destiny, but as a system sustained by fear of losing control. This understanding did not comfort her, but it steadied her. Each night became less shocking, more revealing. Rome believed it was teaching her obedience. Instead, it was showing her its limits. As days blurred together, Cleopatra sensed that this waiting was not endless. Rome prepared her for something, though it had not yet decided what. Display, exile, execution. Possibilities hovered without form. Cleopatra began to prepare as well. Not with weapons or allies, but with resolve. Whatever Rome intended, she would meet it as herself, not as the shadow they tried to reduce her to. In the quiet hours before dawn, she reclaimed her identity piece by piece, knowing that the final choice of her life would belong to her alone, shaped by dignity rather than fear, and carried forward in silence stronger than any decree Rome could ever pronounce. The second phase of captivity revealed itself not through harsher treatment, but through repetition. Days lost their edges. Cleopatra measured time by light and shadow, by the soft echo of sandals in distant corridors. Rome understood that monotony could weaken even the strongest mind. Each day looked the same, and that sameness pressed down on her more heavily than open threat ever could. Morning arrived without ceremony. A servant would enter, head bowed, carrying a simple meal. Bread, fruit, water. Enough to live, never enough to feel satisfied. Cleopatra accepted it in silence. Hunger sharpened awareness. Rome preferred her alert, not broken. Control required consciousness. She spent long hours alone. At first, her thoughts had raced, clinging to memories and regrets. Now they slowed. She learned to sit with stillness, to let thoughts pass without following them. This calm was not peace, but discipline. It was something she could still command. Occasionally, messengers arrived with documents she was instructed to read. Declarations of Rome's order in Egypt. Statements written in firm, elegant language. Cleopatra recognized the strategy. These texts were meant to remind her that the world continued without her voice. Rome no longer needed her. Or so it claimed. As evening approached, tension returned like a familiar ache. Cleopatra prepared herself with quiet rituals. She washed her hands slowly. She straightened her posture. These small acts reminded her that her body still belonged to her, even if her movements were watched. The nightly walk through the palace felt longer now. Guards changed shifts, but their behavior remained the same. Polite, distant, unyielding. They spoke only when necessary. Their silence forced her to listen to her own footsteps, steady and deliberate. The chamber waited as always. But this time, something had changed. A second chair had been added. A subtle adjustment, almost kind. Cleopatra recognized it as another test. Comfort offered conditionally was still a form of control. The men who entered spoke differently now. Their questions turned inward. They asked her how she viewed Rome's rule. Whether she believed resistance was still possible. Whether she accepted her place in history. These were not questions seeking answers. They were invitations to surrender. Cleopatra listened before responding. She chose neutrality where passion once lived. She spoke of time, of change, of how history judged all rulers eventually. Her words were calm, measured. Rome valued calm. It mistook it for agreement. One man leaned forward, studying her closely. He spoke of mercy. Of how Rome rewarded cooperation. Cleopatra felt the weight of that word. Mercy offered by power was never free. It demanded something in return, something unseen. She did not refuse him. She did not accept either. She acknowledged his words and let them rest in the air. Silence unsettled them more than defiance. Rome preferred clear obedience. Ambiguity suggested independence. The sessions grew longer. Sometimes they asked her to repeat answers from previous nights, watching for inconsistencies. Fatigue was their ally. Cleopatra countered it with patience. She slowed her speech. She breathed between sentences. She refused to be rushed. Afterward, she returned to her room more exhausted than before. Sleep came late. Dreams grew vivid. She dreamed of standing before mirrors that reflected strangers. She dreamed of crowns dissolving into dust. She woke each time with her heart steady, her resolve intact. During one afternoon, a servant lingered longer than usual. Their eyes met briefly. In that moment, Cleopatra saw sorrow, and something like admiration. It reminded her that Rome's reach did not erase human feeling. This knowledge warmed her more than food. She began to notice small fractures in her captor's confidence. A hesitation before certain questions. A glance exchanged when she answered too thoughtfully. Rome was powerful, but not certain. It needed her compliance to complete its narrative of victory. This realization marked a quiet shift within her. She was no longer merely enduring. She was observing. Learning. Understanding the shape of the cage meant understanding where its bars were weakest. One night, the questioning ended earlier than usual. She was dismissed with a nod that almost resembled respect. As she walked back, Cleopatra felt something unfamiliar. Anticipation. Not fear of what Rome would do, but curiosity about what it expected from her. In her room, she sat by the window and watched the stars emerge. They looked unchanged, distant and indifferent. Empires rose and fell beneath them. Cleopatra felt herself become part of that larger rhythm. Rome was powerful, yes. But it was temporary. She began to understand that her value to Rome lay not in her obedience, but in her image. Alive, silent, controlled. A symbol captured. That realization brought clarity. Symbols could be reshaped. They could also be denied. The cruelty Rome inflicted was precise. It aimed to strip choice while preserving form. Cleopatra now saw the outline of her final act forming slowly within her thoughts. Not yet defined, but present. A response not of rage, but of authorship. She lay down and closed her eyes, breathing evenly. Tomorrow would repeat much of today. Rome would ask. She would answer. But beneath that surface, something irreversible had begun. The waiting was no longer passive. It was preparation. And with each passing night, Cleopatra moved closer to a decision that Rome, for all its power, could neither predict nor prevent.